Hello there, I'm back. Now looking at Argento's Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is the I've got this in 4K. It's a wonderful edition by Arrow. Basically, Arrow have done so many of these editions of Argento, and I've got all in 4K. All the 4Ks I've got put in the boxes for all of them. Because I'm an Argento fan, especially between like this film up to like Opera and Two Evil Eyes. After that, the films get weaker. And there are reasons for that, which become apparent even watching this first film. But this was his first film. I mean, before that, he'd been a critic. He had held right Once Upon a Time in the West with Bertolucci. Or they developed a story, they had someone else did the script. But when he went on to do his own first film, he kind of loosely adapted Screaming Mimi for the Bird with Crystal Plumage, and it was a massive hit. It started off the giallo genre. Now, Mario Bava had done some films that were kind of giallo-ish kind of things. They started setting up certain conventions, but this is the film that kind of brought everything together and created something that was unique and interesting and was something different for the genre. So this was like the case of before, like if you look at the slasher genre in America in the 70s as well, there had been like certain films, the Black Christmas that done little things around that area. But it wasn't until Halloween came out and just put it all together in America. It's the same thing with this, where it wasn't the first one to take it, but it was a film that sort of brought it all together and was like, okay, this is what this is now. This is our genre now. This is what we're going to be doing. The Bird with the Crystal Plumage was just that film. It just everything came together, and it was the thing where Argento's 2-decade run started here. Now Argento, during this time, had hit after hit. Now, not every film he did was great. There was a few in between that weren't so great. I mean, Cat o' Nine Tails, which followed this one up, even Argento admits is not the best film. And in the 80s, he did Phenomena, which is not the best film. But the films around it were all great. So it's like this thing is, Argento is not like perfect. Every so often he would stumble, but the overall arc of all these films was like there was a lot of really good stuff. So that's what the films really were, is the strong films that came out of that made up the run. And there's an odd film here or there that wasn't strong, but that's compared to the other films, and themselves are fine. But I'm going to start with the Bird with Crystal Plumage here, because the Bird with Crystal Plumage is it's just basically everything came together. Argento was starting this genre, which was based on novels that were mystery novels with horror elements. And Argento never really moved away from that, apart from Suspiria and Inferno. Usually they were mystery novels as a base, but they were done very visually, so they felt like horror movies, but they did kind of more. They did a base of a plot that was mystery level, but the imagery and emotions was very horror based. And everything was tied to the emotions of the characters and the weird psychology, which was very much based in fear and terror of revelation and a sense of everything being out of control. So even though there was the plot links, everything was tied to the visuals and emotion and what horror can bring to the table rather than what thrillers bring. Thrillers bring logic and horror brings emotion. So Argento took the structure of thriller, but he brought the emotion of a horror movie. That's probably the best way I can put it. And one of the things you notice with the Bird with Crystal Plumage is, especially when you see, for the first time I actually saw it projected back there, and it was an amazing revelation of seeing just how much details there was, how many details there was, and how cinematic this framing was. Because when you see in TV, it's good, but it's not the same thing as seeing it projected. It just isn't. And a lot of the kind of thematics just come across as much more integrated into the style than they would have been watching TV, where you've got a much more analytical relationship with what you're watching. You have much more of a chance to think about it as you're watching it, rather than if you've seen a bigger screen, you're experiencing it more because it's much more of an emotional attachment to you. So the film was about an American writer who is kind of burnt out after his book. So someone suggested to him, come to Italy for a while, and it's quiet, and it might recharge your batteries, and you might actually come up with something. And he goes to Italy, and nothing happens. He's still your writer's block. He's still completely stuck. He cannot think of anything to write. And then a friend of his says, "Why don't you do this book, this non-fiction book for me? It's just analytical about birds and things like that." That's all just backstory. We should get for 2 minutes in the film. The idea is this is a burnt out guy who did this thing for the money. Now he's going to go back to America. He's got a girlfriend from that area, so he's going to take her back. But he's still kind of trying to find himself. He's still trying to work out what he wants to do with his life. He's still trying to work out who he is. Then on the final day before he goes home, he goes for a walk and he sees a murder taking place in an art gallery. Because art gallery is in this massive window. And he sees through the window someone being attacked by a psycho killer. And the psycho killer is then runs away, and there's this woman who's just crawling on the ground, with blood all over. And he's trapped in between these two glasses. He tries to go in to help her, and he gets trapped in these two frames. And he gets someone to go and phone the police. But he's the only witness to the attack. And there's been other psycho murders of these women going on throughout the city. So the police are trying to figure this out because this is the fourth attack, and they're trying to work out, okay, what's actually going on here? And as he's watching, he's thinking, I saw something, but I don't know what it is, or something that doesn't quite fit. And that's one thing Argento always brings to these films is there's an image you see, and there's a clue there, but you can't quite figure out what the clue is about. There's something about the clue that doesn't quite work. Something doesn't quite fit. And you're with the obsessive protagonist trying to work out what it is. So the mystery is try to work out what doesn't fit in this image that you keep going back to, try to figure it out. So it's an irrational feeling trying to get some rationality out of something that should make sense but doesn't quite make sense. So that's what I said earlier on about trying to take put the horror into the mystery genre or the thriller genre. This sense of you try the logic of it all, but what's really getting to the emotion of it all, there's something not quite right here, and that's what drives the movie. And that's what drives the whole film, is just a sense of there's some subtext. You can't quite work it out, but you feel enough purpose. Like the mystery will make sense, and also the mystery has a meaning, which is what Argento lost in the 90s. Because in the 80s and the 70s, with stuff like Four Flies in Grey Velvet and Deep Red and Tenebrae and Opera, you always felt like there was an emotional attachment between the murders, the person doing them, the person trying to work it out. Like there's more to the story than just the murders. You kind of lost that in the 90s onwards, where it just felt like there was a lot of just about murders. There weren't really the attachment to the plot. The plot was just there to get to the murders rather than the plot was there to show a problem the character had. So this film is about him trying to work out what do you see? What do you see there that he can't quite work out? And as he's trying to investigate, there's a policeman Also try to work it out in the policeman. There's a lot of cynical humour about how the policeman's lying to the public just to keep him off his case. He's trying to work this thing, he cannot figure it out. There's a police are like, try to show, like, yeah, we know what we're doing. And behind the scenes are like, I don't have a clue what the hell is going on here. And have a cynical attitude. And he goes, I'll go up to the press conference and make something up. See what happens. And as the film goes on, as you get more clues to what's going on, you actually start to realize the motivation is nothing to do with logic. And that's what you get with Argento. The thing he brings is it's not about money, it's not about overarching scheme that's complicated. It shows an emotional problem that the killer has that's something you can actually understand. It's something you understand, it's understandable emotion that's just gone wrong that creates all this tragedy. And it's the hero realizing that themselves are not that perfect. They've got lots of fractures in their personality. They've got an obsessive side that's getting cured almost by the idea of obsession of trying to focus on. So it's all about these weird characters ultimately, and all the characters are odd. Argento seems to understand that perfectly. Like his characters are odd, and they're going from A to B to C to D to E. Find all these other characters, you know. So you get like a criminal who is recommended to the hero, who always tells them the opposite of what he means. But once you figure it out, it allows you to figure out what he's telling them. There's a killer who's hired by the our real killer to knock off our hero, which leads to a 20-minute section, and you find out a lot more of the life of that killer. There's an artist who is got all these cats around, and he's making paintings about different traumas as well as trying to be new agey, and it's hilarious because it turns out he's eating cats, and there's all these weird things. There's the guy who employed our lead character who's got his own little obsessions. There's the owner of this art gallery who sold the initial painting that led to all the tragedy. That his assistant was one of the women who were killed, and he's obviously gay as hell. There's all these weird characters, and you actually find out a lot more about them, and it becomes a case of, yeah, they're just the plot, but it's also about them. It's about what they're about, and it creates this idea of the society around our protagonist is going mad, slowly going mad, and the killer themselves is just one side of madness. That's one person whose madness has gone psychopathic, but everyone else is just as mad. There's no escaping the crazy that goes on with these characters, and it's all you get just a sense of below the surface. There's an underlying, tensions, an underlying focus that's really interesting. So this is one of those films that just has something to it that's not explicable. It's just something that's unusual about the film that's just different. It's a different type of film from what is typically involved a giallo. Because a lot of giallos, the reputation is they are murder machines. There's a mystery, but it's just an excuse for murder. And one thing we get to find about the giallos as you start watching them is, like the spaghetti westerns in the past, they're taking this sort of genre. The directors are going from spaghetti westerns to these ones, then they want to do crime stories. And it's like, okay, what can we do to show how crazy this country is right now? Let's kind of lock character actors and give them weird characters and just suggest this country is insane. And you get a lot of giallos like Sergio Martino did, where there are murders, but a lot of the point seems to be how crazy everyone is. But no one did it as well as Argento at its peak, where it felt like everyone was tied into the plot. The plot was just an explanation of how crazy this country is. And it feels almost like there's no sane person. Even the person who's the protagonist is just kind of nuts. They're just not quite there. So the only thing I've got to focus them to not be nuts themselves is this mystery of trying to work out what this thing they can't figure out is. And of course, we find out as the story goes on, dealing with the mystery has actually brought this character back to life as a writer. He's actually starting to get ideas again. It's almost like it's brought back his whatever was the thing that made him bored and apathetic has now been kicked back in life due to danger, and he's starting to get a sense of who he is again. Like, always he needs a danger to actually create, and you get all these other people who you see in the film, the drug addicts, and they're crazy, and they've all got their own ways of finding rationality in their lives that's, not logical to the outside world, but as you find out the characters, it all makes some sort of sense. And the revelation of the killer is really terrific. So, spoilers now. So we'll go on. I'm going to spoilers here, but it's like the film's been out for I don't know, 50 years now. So basically, the killer is the victim. The person who was getting stabbed was actually the person trying to stab the assailant. The person who he thought was the assailant was actually her husband trying to stop her. She was actually the killer herself. And then a lot of the murders took place around about it was him trying to stop the investigation into her. And the reason why a lot of the stuff was messy was because he was not good at it. And it all suddenly makes sense. It's like this weird marriage where the wife saw a painting because she was attacked when she was young and it traumatized her, and she managed to repress it. And suddenly this painting of the incident set it all off, and she became a psychopath. And she's not targeting, she identifies with the killer, not herself. So she's attacking other young women because that's where her brain's gone. And it's just terrific. It's just a wonderful idea, and it's creepy. Like, once you know who the killer is, the rest of the film's even creepier because, like, this all makes sense. Because you do have one really dark murder halfway through of this young woman which feels very violent, and then you find out later that it's actually a woman doing the murder, and the power thing you were assuming was one thing was actually something else. And everything's suddenly much more interesting and much more disturbing. And that's what Argento could do when he was at his peak. He could add twists to the story so that when you find out who the murderer is, it's not just a surprise, it's actually an emotional attachment. Like Four Flies in Grey Velvet has a murderer where suddenly you're thinking, oh my God. The same way the Deep Red and Tenebrae, the actual identity of the murderers and why they're doing it actually adds a lot to the plot. And in retrospect, everything else, which when the first time you see it as a murder plot of characters, then we see it again from the point of view of the murderer, it's some of these really weird character moments that are all these people who are all strange and messed up. So Argento in the 70s and 80s was fascinating because he was doing one genre, but he was also doing lots of little stories within his genre films too. I think when we hit the 90s, that wasn't really in fashion, and people who have invested in him just wanted the murders. And you saw him try to get outside of that with like Phantom of the Opera and things, which weren't really his type of film. And I think he had problems finding, and he could walk through his obsessions in the 70s and 80s, and in the 90s he had problems finding a new obsession, a new drive that would give him the fascinating insights to these killers and why they were doing their things. And suddenly it was like, they're just murder machines. And that's not interesting. And we try outside the genres and try and do variations in the genre, which were extremely weird, really, because I think he kind of burnt through the creative drive that created his peak period. So the rest were kind of shadows of what was once great. But what was great was it's still amazing. It still look great even now. So it's just really celebrate Argento on its peak because it was a 20-year run of really strong films. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be back soon with one final one. which I'll live stream. So I'm hoping you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Bye.